Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar on Martin Lighting 101 presented by Marion Hall. My name is Laura Lawrence and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. Just a few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a chat function where you can submit questions to the presenter and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. This webinar will also be recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions workshop series on pro.harman.com, as well as visiting Harman Professional University to see our many on-demand and certification courses that are available to you for free. And now I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Marion Hall, the presenter for today's webinar. With more than 30 years in the lighting industry, Marion has worked as a touring lighting technician, console programmer, support specialist, and technical trainer. Marion has been with Martin for the last 7 years and currently works in product and application support assisting customers. And now I'll pass the mic over to you, Marion.
Hey, Laura, thanks for that warm introduction. Again, I'm Marion Hall. I am a product and application support specialist for Martin by Harman. I'm based in Dallas-Fort Worth here in Texas and so forth. Specifically, what I do is I provide advanced technical assisted solutions training to our customers around the U.S. I also have two counterparts based on both the West and East Coast, and where I cover the central part of the United States. Before I get started, actually, let me tell you a little bit about myself and how I got started in this crazy business. So it kind of all started 30 years ago. So I was playing in a band, essentially, here in Texas and so forth, and I had a friend that was mixing audio, and he was working for a company called Verilight, which makes automated lighting fixtures, and they still do to this day and so forth. So he asked me if I was interested in taking a job working in their manufacturing division building moving lights, which at that time I had no idea what a moving light was. I mean, what the heck was that and so forth. So, of course, I was going to college during the evening and so forth. I needed money for my tuition and so forth, and I said, yeah, why not? So anyway, I ended up working in the manufacturing division for Verilight. I started in 1986, and we were actually, I found out later, building 300 moving lights for the tour Genesis, the Invisible Touch tour, specifically if you're that old and you remember that and so forth. And so we were building 300 of these fixtures, and it really changed my life. So as you can see in this picture here, we're essentially assembling these products. They're both spot fixtures and watch fixtures and so forth. They're very sophisticated. They pan and tilt, change colors, and they're programmable by a lighting console. Quite frankly, it looked like something right out of Star Trek off their bridge and so forth. So I was completely fascinated by this and blown away, especially when we fired them up. When we fired up 300 of these things sitting on these cases, these road cases, which were made out of wood, by the way, essentially, I was changed. It changed my life forever. I mean, it was like, I don't know, the purest color that I've ever seen out of a lighting fixture next to looking through a prism or rainbow or so forth. And the fact that they changed colors and moved, I was completely sold. So whatever I was going to do in my career, I completely changed it and so forth. So I stayed there, built those fixtures and so forth. And eventually I was asked by Verilight to go on tour with these fixtures. And I said, hey, why not? So I thought I was going to be out for a few weeks and then go back and continue to work in manufacturing and so forth. And I ended up, by the time it was all said and done, spending about 6 or 7 years actually touring the world. So you can see a bunch of my stupid badges and lanyards and so forth from all the different productions I worked for. Beyond Verilight, I changed companies a few times and so forth, but I toured for many years and so forth, and eventually got tired, got burned out on the road and so forth, and got a desk job specifically doing support and training, which I'm still doing to this day, interesting enough, and so forth. But it was really fascinating being on tour with, I was basically a robotic technician, you know, and this is something back then was really unheard of because it was such a new technology and so forth. So it was a really fascinating time for me. I got to tour the world and so forth. But anyway, a lot of fun. And like I said, even to this day, it's changed my life. It is, I love it. It's fun. It's like basically painting with light, essentially, is what I tell a lot of my colleagues and so forth. Now, on the side, just very quickly here, when I'm not doing my day job and so forth, I also here locally do lighting for houses of worship, small theaters and clubs and things like that. I also have the opportunity to do lighting for the Dallas Stars, which is our hockey team down here in Dallas and so forth. So not only just assisting them technically, but also programming lights and so forth. So it's been a lot of fun, and I try to keep my chops up and so forth. So that's what I do as hobbies and so forth. So I'm totally 100% lighting 101, so literally. So a little bit about our company before we actually get into what we're going to talk about today in this webinar. We're actually, Martin is actually owned by Harman. And Harman, as you can see here in the slide, consists of several different companies, and a lot of these you've probably heard of. AKG, AMX, BSS, Crown, BBX, JBL, I'm just skipping around here and so forth. So we're under a big umbrella and so forth. We were purchased by Harman back in 2013. And one of the advantages of actually working with Harman is the fact that we can actually use their resources, both their engineering and manufacturing resources, to really expand our technology that we couldn't really do before and so forth. And plus, we collaborate a lot of times with these different manufacturers, these different companies, I should say, and actually offer a turnkey solution to our customers and so forth. So, and interesting enough, Harman is actually owned by Samsung, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with Samsung. They make phones, they make television sets. They make all kinds of stuff, washing machines and so forth. So it's a huge company, and it's been a real benefit for Martin to be able to leverage those resources and collaborate with these different companies to basically expand our technologies here. So that's basically what our company is and so forth. So the markets that we're involved in, there's several. We have concert touring, we have theater, television, nightclubs, cruise ships, public spaces, facades, exhibitions, hotels, movie theaters, dogs and cats living together. So we're a very diversified company as far as our markets are concerned. So we've been around about 30 years, actually over 30 years now and so forth. We have manufacturing and R&D actually over mostly in Europe and Denmark, China, and the United Kingdom, United Kingdom specifically for atmospheric products and so forth, and also manufacturing sites in that area. We collaborate a lot with the product managers that are overseas with the products and so forth, and provide them feedback if we have issues with our products, or sometimes if we get feedback from customers that want to basically say, hey, can you add this to your product? Or I think this would be a great idea. So we have a great relationship with our product managers. It is so far been really great to work with them and so forth. We have monthly meetings with them, and it's been great overall. Now, before we actually get into the actual products themselves, I want to just state first off that I'm not a salesman by any means. I'm a nuts and bolts guy. So I'm essentially not trying to create like a fancy marketing slideshow here. I'm just trying to I'm interested in educating you on our Martin product line and teach you about lighting in general. So I called this Martin Lighting 101 because it's actually going to be two parts. Number one, I'm going to teach you about what products we have to offer lighting-wise, and I'm also going to go over a little bit of theory as far as lighting is concerned, as you'll see here. So just kind of bear with me. Every once in a while, I'll kind of go off to the side and so forth and talk a little bit about like what's a dichroic filter and what's a beam light and so forth. So kind of educate you. So if you're new to lighting, if you're new to Martin, you're unfamiliar with our product line and so forth, then this is what this is all about and so forth. And certainly if you have any questions, you can ask those at the end of the webinar, excuse me, or you can email me directly, or also I would say check out martin.com, because all the information, all the products that I'm going to cover is on that website, as long as brochures. There's also videos and so forth to go over these different products, because I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because we have so many in our catalog and so forth. So I just wanted to make that clear before we get started here. So let's go over some of our different products that we have here. So we have automated lights, moving lights that change color, pan, and tilt, and so forth. We have static fixtures, such as ellipsoidal products, RGB WLED products, RCANs per se with RGB WLEDs. effects lights such as the atomic strobe LED that you see here on the screen. We have architectural products for lighting buildings and so forth. We have creative video products. And we also manufacture atmospheric products such as smoke machines, hazers, and just low-lying fog machines and so forth. So we'll look at those as we go along here. So I wanted to start by talking about a little bit about our automated static and effects lights. So let's dig into those right now. So let's start with our Viper line. So our Viper line has been around for quite a while, 8 to 10 years and so forth. And this has been kind of our pro line that you would see being utilized in concert touring, stadium shows and so forth, award shows. I don't know of any rental company within North America, or for that matter throughout the world, that hasn't seen a Viper product in their inventory and so forth. So we have the Mac Viper Profile, which is considered to be a spot fixture, which has a hard edge beam of light. It has a CMY color mixing system, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. It projects gobos. It has the ability to have it zooms, so you can either make a tight beam out of it or flood it out and so forth. It has an iris, all kinds of different features and so forth. There's also the Viper Performance here. I'm kind of out of sync here as far as the slides and so forth. But the Performance itself essentially is a similar product, except it has a shutter system that allows you to frame the light. So that's very interesting. And then we have a wash version of it called the Wash DX, essentially, which is basically provides a big, large beam of light out of it with the same CMY color system. There's the DX version, which also has a similar framing system, although not as sophisticated as what you see in the Performance system. We also have basically what I call the Viper on steroids, which is the Viper Air Effects, where we basically stripped out some of the features to give the fixture more output, okay? And then finally, as part of the Mac line, we also have the Axiom Hybrid, which is basically a combination of a spot and a wash fixture all in one unit and so forth. Now, all of these fixtures are based on what we refer to as a discharge lamp, which leads me to my next 101. What is a discharge lamp? So a discharge lamp essentially is you've got a glass bulb, essentially, with 2 electrodes in it, okay? And what happens is you use this big ballast that basically is used to energize the lamp to create an arc across those electrodes, like the lamp that you see on the right. It's a perfect example because you can see the 2 electrodes there. And what it does is it ignites the gases inside of there and creates a very bright output out of the lamp itself. Now, there's 2 versions of it shown here, and there's many more, actually. So you have the one without a reflector, as you can see on the right-hand side, which is out of our Viper product line, by the way. And then you have one on the left, which is kind of what you traditionally see in what we call beam lights and so forth, which actually has a built-in reflector. So again, it uses high voltage to essentially ignite the gas in that. And one of the advantages of that is that you get extremely bright output. Most of the time, the output itself is a very cool white color. So it's going to be between 5,600 to 6,500 degrees Kelvin coming out of it. So it's a very blue, kind of a white light coming out of the source and so forth. But the one downside of a discharge lamp, actually 2, is number 1, you can't dim it. So you have to use a shutter system, or I should say a dimming system like a mechanical dimmer to actually dim it, to fade it in and out, because you can't extinguish the bulb, because it takes 10 minutes for you approximately to restrike the lamp if it's doused, if it's turned off and so forth. And the other thing about discharge lamps, even though they're extremely bright and so forth, is also the other issue is they actually over time will degrade. They'll eventually have to be replaced after 700 or 800 hours. Some of them go as long as 6,000 hours. So you're always going to have to constantly replace the lamps. Now, if you take a brand new lamp and install on a fixture and put it next to a fixture that has one that has 600 hours on it, you're going to see a shift in the color temperature output, and that's going to be very noticeable, especially if you're using television. You're going to have one fixture that's kind of brownish looking, you're going to have another that's very white and so forth. So that's some of the disadvantages of these types of discharge lamps, but the advantages is it create an extreme amount of light and so forth, and they're still used today, especially in hybrid fixtures. Now, as you'll learn a little bit later in this webinar, we're kind of shifting more to LED technology, because LED technology has become more if not better than in some cases 2 discharge lamps. So anyway, a little bit more 101 here. We just looked at the MAC profile line, the MAC line, excuse me, and one of the things about that system is we use what we refer to as a subtractive color system. Now, there's also additive color systems that exist out there for LEDs and so forth. So let's talk about the differences between the two. So the attractive LED, or excuse me, attractive subtractive system, essentially what you do is you take a white light, like a discharge lamp, you put in the rear of the unit, and then you take filters essentially to subtract color out of that white light. So in most of these moving light fixtures that you see, not only with Martin, but some of the other companies and so forth, what they essentially have is they have filters that basically gradually move in and out of the light source to change the color. So that's a subtractive color system. The source is a white light, but you're essentially using these filters to subtract color. Now, the opposite of that is an additive color system, which is used a lot in LED technology, where essentially you have a set of red, green, blue, and sometimes white LEDs, sometimes amber, and so forth. And what you do is you add those basically by bringing up the intensity on those LEDs to create color. So in the case of the additive color system, which is on the left-hand side, if you take red and green, you get yellow. If you take red and blue, you get magenta. If you look at the subtractive, you get basically to create magenta, you take yellow, or sorry, to create red, you take magenta and yellow to create red, magenta and cyan to create blue. So that's the two types of systems. Now, back in the good old days before LED technology and dichroic filters, which we're going to talk about, the way you did color was actually with a gel, which is a piece of plastic. Essentially, you took a white light or a tungsten lamp, and you put a piece of plastic on it that was colored, and that's how you got color out of the unit and so forth. So we had different colors of gels, greens and yellows and all that different stuff. This is one actually that I just honestly just put on a desk lamp that I have here in my office and so forth, just to show you an example. And essentially with the advantage of these types of gels and so forth is they're very cheap. They're just pieces of plastic, like thin plastic and so forth, and they're colored, and you just put them over the source and you get color. But the downside of that is a couple of things. Number one, you're stuck with that color. And number two, if you use very saturated colors like Congos or blues or deep greens and so forth, and you have a high energy 1,000-watt incandescent tungsten bulb behind it, it's going to burn that gel up very quickly and so forth. So it's difficult to do saturated colors without basically ruining the actual gel itself. Now, along came something called dichroic filters, okay? And this has been around for 20 or 30 years now, essentially. And what a dichroic filter system is it's a, in this case, a subtractive color system where this piece of glass and this photo that you see here only allows a certain color of light to pass through it. Now, any light that doesn't pass through it is reflected back into the source. So you're not having all that energy being absorbed on a piece of plastic like a gel and so forth. It's actually being rejected and being sent back to the source. If you look at this picture, it actually looks like it's kind of a greenish color. Well, that's not actually the color that it's actually passing through it. That's what's reflecting back off of it from the fluorescent lining that's above the worker here that's working on this. So as you can see, this wheel is designed in such a way as it rotates through the source, it becomes more and more saturated. And as you remove that, it becomes less saturated. So this is really the technology that kind of kicked off the whole moving light world per se, because without this, it would be very difficult. You'd end up with gel scrollers, which is what we used to use, would literally look like scrolls and so forth to change color. So this is really what kicked off the moving light technology and so forth. Now, another version of this is the LED technology, which is obviously, as of late, become more and more utilized in our industry because LEDs technology has improved so much over the years and so forth. And there's really two versions of this. There's kind of what I call the Skittles, for lack of better words, where you have basically, this is the picture that you see on the left, where you have RGB, sometimes RGBW LEDs, red, green, blue, white, and so forth. And what you do is you just change the intensity on those LEDs to create an added color. Now, one of the downsides of this kind of Skittles look is it looks terrible when you're looking at the beam of light, and it also creates kind of an ugly image. If you were to take this light and put it on a wall and so forth, you would see a lot of streaking and so forth because the colors don't mix very well. Actually, it works fine for a lot of different applications and so forth, and it's certainly cheaper than doing the next version, which is on the right-hand side, which is a 3-in-1 LED system or a 4-in-1 LED system, where you basically have a single LED, if you will, but it's not a single color. It's actually multiple colors in one cell. So in this case, I'm showing a picture of a cheap par can that I had. LED par can I had lying around here in my office and so forth, and showing you the difference between that versus the Skittles look that you see on the left-hand side. So it's basically an LED essentially that can produce multiple colors, red, green, blue, white, red, green, blue, amber, white in some cases and so forth. And so that's the difference between the two. And we use both of these types of technologies along with the CMY color system. So I just wanted to stop a little bit and talk about what the difference is between subtractive versus additive color systems, and you can see examples of that here. Okay, so let's jump back into talking about our family of products here. This is the Quantum family. This is based on, we have actually two products here. We have one that's called the Quantum Profile. It uses a white LED engine, so it's not using a discharge lamp, and essentially has a CMY color mixing system, a subtractive color system to change color. It also has a color wheel as well with specific colors, because there's some CMY systems that don't produce really good greens and in some cases reds and so forth. So we also have a color wheel as optional in that picture and so forth. And then we have the Quantum Wash, which is an additive color system as opposed to the subtractive, which actually consists of an RGBW quad LED, as we looked at earlier and so forth, for mixing colors and so forth. So the one on the left, the Quantum Profile, is referred to as a spot fixture. The one on the right is a wash fixture. It creates a very broad beam of light and so forth. So both of these are medium-sized fixtures, but they have very high output. They're very low profile in design, so they're perfect for applications like houses of worship. Concert touring is certainly utilize them and so forth. And they don't actually consume a lot of power because they're using LED technology as opposed to discharge. Discharge lamps consume a lot of power and so forth because of that ballast that's used and so forth. So these are perfect for those types of applications like houses of worship, concert touring, smaller theaters and so forth. They're very bright. As a matter of fact, the Quantum Wash has an output of 15,000 lumens, just to give you an idea. But that's our Quantum family there, and you can find more information on that on our website, of course. I kind of alluded to talking about spot and wash fixtures. So what's the difference between a spot versus a wash versus a hybrid, if you've never heard of the hybrid unit? Spot fixtures basically create a hard edge beam of light, and they're typically used for creating lighting specials in a concentrated area using optics like lenses that you would see in cameras and so forth to focus the unit in a very tight beam. A concert tour follow spot, if you go to a concert event and so forth, the follow spots you see to light performers, they're typically hard-edged fixtures and so forth. They create that very tight spotlight beam and so forth, where wash fixtures are really designed to wash a large area on stage. So if I was doing a concert tour and lighting a stage, I would use a wash fixture to basically create, like, let's say, a blue wash on stage, and then use the spot fixtures to create specials on performers, on pianos, on set pieces, to project gobo images, which our products do, our spot fixtures do, and so forth. And then a hybrid fixture, which has kind of come around over the last 5 or 6 years, attempts to do both. It's both a spot and a wash. Now, most of the hybrid fixtures out there right now are based on a discharge lamp, by the way, just FYI, because it's difficult to create a very tight beam of light, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, with an LED. So they're still primarily based on a discharge lamp and so forth. And all of these can be found on your kind of token concert tours and car shows and things like that, award shows. You'll see these 3 different types of fixtures quite frequently. Okay, so back into talking about our product line here. This is our Mac Aura line. It's been around for quite a bit. We have actually 3 versions of it now. I'm going to talk about the third one in just a second here. So we have the original Mac Aura. Okay, it's a 3,850 lumens and so forth. It's actually based on an added color system, so you have an RGB type color system in it. And then you have the XB, which is a brighter version of it, which is actually a 6,000 lumen product, so it's a little bit brighter and so forth. And one of the things that's unique about these products is not only beyond having the ability to do a zoom, so it actually has the ability to zoom the beam. It also has something called the Aura backlight, or what we refer to sometimes in our field and so forth as eye candy. So essentially what we did with the Aura, beginning with the first one actually, is we actually took a set of LEDs and we backlit the lens. Now why this is cool is it first of all gives the designers, lighting designers that use these products a little bit different type of an effect and so forth. The example I use a lot of times is if you've ever seen an award show like the Academy Awards or the Emmys or any of those types of shows and so forth, they always do a wide shot, an establishing wide shot, and then they kind of cut in and do close-ups of the performers or whatever, the speakers and presenters and so forth. And one of the things that television doesn't like to see is this big black void above the stage itself. So one of the things that you can do with the Aura essentially is kind of kick in that Aura effect and kind of create a backlight to fill in that void. And that's just one example of how you can do that. Now, we use this Aura effect actually in other products, but this is the first one where we kind of came up with the idea. The engineers over in Denmark were like playing around one day and so forth and said, hey, let's try this. And it looked really cool. So it's just an added feature that you can, we provide to our designers or to lighting designers and so forth to play around with. So, and it's turned out to be very popular. And we've sold thousands of Auras and so forth. Now, just recently, actually, as of April, we announced the new Aura Pixel, which is basically an Aura on total steroids. It's essentially the same, pretty much the same look and feel of the Aura, which is, by the way, considered a wash light, if I didn't make it clear earlier. And essentially, it has up to 13,000 lumen of output, so it's 13,000 lumens. It actually has 19 segments, that, so you can actually individually control the individual segments of the LEDs that are in it and so forth. It also contains the Aura backlight. It has a 1:8 zoom on it. And it also has something called the tungsten emulation mode. So if you want more of a warmer color coming out of the fixture to make it look more like candlelight, for example, for lack of better words, then you can kick it into that mode. And it also runs off a standard DMX512, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this webinar. Also ArtNet, which is a kind of a derivative of DMX, a streaming ACN, and off of our P3 system, which I'll also discuss a little bit later. So this is brand new and so forth, and it's a really cool product. We just launched it again last month and so forth, and we're really excited to see how it gets utilized in our market and so forth. Okay, now we have our Mac Encore family. Now this series of fixtures was actually designed from the ground up for television and theater. We went to our customers in these markets and so forth and asked them what they needed from a moving light, okay? And so what they were looking for was a low noise product, first and foremost. So if you're in the middle of an opera or you're doing a Broadway show, the last thing you want to hear is cooling fans. I mean, that is very distracting and so forth. I remember, I'm just kind of digressing here, back when we tried to do an opera back in Los Angeles, way back in 1986 and 87, with the moving lights that I showed you earlier and so forth from Verilight, one of the biggest complaints was the cooling fans were running constantly to keep the discharge lamp cooled and so forth, and we had to shut them off during some of the performances to basically, make the opera singer happy, for lack of better words and so forth. So this fixture essentially was designed for that type of environment. So for television and theater applications, it was built from the ground up and so forth. For that, it uses a white LED engine. So again, it's a subtracted color system, but you have a white LED engine in the back of it, and then you use a CMY color system to change color like we talked about before. Now, we make a couple of versions of it. We have the warm and cold. The warm creates more of a warm look, again, kind of your your candlelight kind of warm tungsten look, 3200 degree color temperature, Kelvin color temperature. There's a cold version, which is more of a 56 to 6500 degree color temperature and so forth. And we also make 2 wash versions of it as well. So it's a relatively new product. It's been very popular on Broadway and so forth. Now, the Allure is kind of a unique fixture. Let me talk a little bit about this. It is actually the first, specifically the Allure Profile, is the first spot fixture that allows you to control each of the individual LEDs, so it's an LED-based product, by the way, separately. It's the first spot one. There's been wash fixtures that have allowed you to control the independent LEDs within the unit itself, but this is the first spot fixture that I know of that's on the market that allows you to control the LEDs individually. So we have 7 individual segments there for control. And it also supports the standard DMX protocols, as I mentioned earlier, but it also supports our P3 processor. And again, I'll talk about that more in a second. So if you take a look at this slide, a little bit more information here. So it's a 7 times 60 watt RGBW LED. It creates a very vibrant and bright palette. It's got our known color calibration system, which we use for all of our products. We want to make sure that whatever we produce out of our manufacturing facilities, the color is consistent. That's very important to Martin and has been since day one and so forth. It's got all kinds of different modes and so forth, and it also can do very instant and smooth transitions. Now, the cool thing about this, and this is an aerial shot of what can come out of it, one of the neat things that you can do is if you're using our P3 system is you can actually send video into the fixture itself from our P3 processor. And what that essentially means is for example, if you were doing an award show and a contestant just won or something, you know, the Emmy or whatever, you may have a video running on their video screens and their IMAX screens and so forth of maybe, I don't know, red, white, and blue kind of flag kind of thing or something going on. That can actually be mapped to the fixture itself. So you can actually flip the switch literally on the lighting console that's controlling the Allure and essentially basically have that video actually be presented out of the output of the fixture. So it makes the whole lighting rig look homogeneous. If you've got your LED walls in red, white, and blue, maybe doing some patriotic thing, and plus the lighting fixtures themselves doing exactly the same thing. It's really cool. So this is the first spot fixture that I'm aware of that that actually does that and so forth. Now we have a wash version of it that's very similar to it. It's just more of a wash type of beam as opposed to a more of a spot hard edge beam as you see here and so forth. This leads us to our ERA family, which is relatively new. The first product that came out as far as the ERA family is the 300 Profile. It's an LED-based system again, white LED engine, 6,500 degree LED engine itself, 9,500 lumens. As a CMY color system, it's very compact. So this is perfect for small stages because it's so lightweight in footprint. You can put a bunch on a truck and so forth because they're so small. It's very bright, and it's perfect for small theaters. It's perfect for concert training applications to use as a stage light, as something as like a background light, for example, on a stage and so forth, because it's very small and so forth. So moving on, recently we introduced the performance range, which is basically a step, you know, as far as taking LED technology to the new level. Brighter is better. This is what this product line is all about. So it's LED light engine based and so forth. So you've got a white LED engine or a warm white LED engine, depending on which product you use and so forth. And then depending on the product, you get bright, and brighter and so forth. So both the ERA 400 Performance, cold and warm, are basically 400, they're based on a 400 watt LED engine, which gives you 10,000 lumens of light. The ERA 600, now let me go back and mention that there's a warm version of it because if you want that more tungsten look, and that's what, if you're doing a theater show, for example, and that's what the type of output that you want, more of a warmer color, more of a 3,200 degree color temperature and so forth, you'll probably prefer to use the warm. If you want more of the cold look, the more of the concert training look, you'll go with the cold. So that's what the difference is between the cold and the warm. So the 600 is actually a based on a 550-watt LED engine, and actually produces up to 19,000 lumens of output. That's a lot of output from an LED engine. And then the Era 800 is our brightest fixture that we have to date based on LED technology, which gives you a whopping 34,000 lumens of output. Okay, so all of these fixtures are basically considered spot fixtures, but they also have, all these fixtures include framing shutters. So once again, we were talking about framing systems. You can essentially shutter and crop off the light, which is very important, like with theater applications back with the Encores, because they have a similar shutter system. It's very important, once again, to designers to be able to crop off the light so it doesn't bleed onto curtains and things that they don't want the light to be on and so forth. So all of these we decided to include framing shutters in and so forth. And then finally, as part of the Era line, which also recently got introduced, is a hybrid version. I spoke briefly of hybrids earlier. This is basically an outdoor version of a hybrid unit. Now, this uses a discharge lamp, okay, as opposed to an LED engine. So you've got a discharge lamp, you've got a CMY color system. It also has a color wheel, has a rotating and static go wheels. You can look at this information again on our website if you want to get into more details and so forth. A couple of prisms, a motorized focus and so forth. But the main feature, this is the first product that you've actually released that's actually outdoor rated. So if you're doing outdoor stadium festivals and so forth, and you're concerned about rain and all that, that's what this fixture is designed for and so forth. And it creates that very collimated beam of light, which is very typical of what you see of a beam light, okay? So this is a relatively new product for us. This is our first venture into having a moving light product that actually is IP or outdoor rated and so forth. Now, let me digress here for a second and say, well, ask, what is a beam light? You know, so a beam light essentially, and you see them all the time, especially on wrestling shows, WWE, and those types of shows, a lot of times on award shows as well, interesting enough, concert touring like Trans-Siberian Orchestra, to give you an example. A beam light essentially creates a very tight beam of light, I mean, for lack of better words. So it's really used for aerial effects and so forth. And it's typically a discharge lamp, as I mentioned, typically one that has a reflector on it like we saw earlier and so forth. So it creates that pencil style of beam, but it's extremely bright. And one of the advantages of that is it cuts through when you're doing like a show that uses a lot of LED technology, LED walls and so forth, a lot of concerts use, and again, a lot of award shows use and so forth, it'll actually, it's so bright, it'll actually cut through that, which is something I'll talk about a little bit later about some of the technologies in the future, the direction we're going. But anyway, that's a beam light and so forth. But one of the downsides of beam lights typically is you can't really produce crisp images. So like if you have gobos, which are basically patterns that you can install on a wheel in the fixture and so forth, you can't really get them that sharp because they're really not designed to basically like a spot fixture like the Vipers and the Encores that we talked about earlier to create really crisp gobo images and so forth. They're more used for aerial effects, and they're all over the place. There's so many companies manufacturing those, including ourselves and so forth. So the hybrid fixture that we just looked at earlier is basically a beam light, although you can flood it out and make it into a pseudo wash lamp and so forth. Now, we also recently got into the ellipsoidal market. This is a product called the ELP ellipsoidal. And ellipsoidals have been around since the Stone Age, essentially. So it's basically a fixture that is considered a spotlight. It has a lens on the front of it that basically you manually change the position of to change the focus of it and so forth. And so they've been around forever. Certainly Broadway uses them a lot because you don't need moving lights in a lot of cases. You don't need all the fancy moving lights when you're just going to be lighting a static fixture, static position. So no need for all that technology and to spend that money. So ellipsoidal has been around forever, and we decided to get into the ellipsoidal market. We found that recently that customers were interested in that because of the LED technology and so forth, and moving away from the old school tungsten lamps, which were traditionally used in these types of ellipsoidal fixtures. And because the LED technology is there now and it's affordable, we decided to make our own. So we have two versions of it. We have the ELP CL and we have the WW. And the only difference is the CL actually has 5 different colors: RGB, W, lime, and one other color, I believe. And then there's the warm white, which basically is essentially a warm white type of fixture. So if you're wanting just that warm light that we were talking about earlier, then you can use that. And if you're looking for a colored version of it, then you can use the colored version, the CL version of it. And that was RGB amber lime, by the way, for the CL and so forth. So now one of the things that we just released actually is a couple of zoom options, accessories that you can actually add to the existing ELP fixtures. And there's 2 variations of it. There's a 15 to 30 degree version or a 25 to 50 degree version. So essentially you just bolt this onto the front of the unit, and it allows you to get variable zoom on it and so forth. So you can adjust the zoom manually to whatever position you want, depending on the throw that you have, how far the fixture is from the stage to the truss that it's on and so forth. So those are a couple of accessories that you can add to it, and they're available in different colors. Now let me just backtrack a second and mention that the ELP itself is also compatible with basically off-the-shelf lenses, so you don't have to buy our lenses per se from Martin itself. You can actually use off-the-shelf lenses that are readily available in a lot of different rental houses and so forth. And there's also other accessories that you can install in ELPs, like basically gobos and so forth. So you can have a single gobo that slides into the gobo position, the gobo holder that we have in the unit itself. You can put barn doors, which help you crop the light, and even gels in the front of it if you want to. But this accessory is brand new and so forth, and I thought I would go ahead during this webinar and mention it and so forth. Now, as far as effects lights, we have these are a little bit out of order here, but I'm going to start with the Atomic 3000 DMX. It's basically a big, frickin' bright strobe, and it's been used all over the world for many years. It's basically a xenon lamp and so forth, with a reflector. You crank it up, and then you've seen God. I mean, essentially, it's a very bright strobe. You can turn it off very quickly. We've sold thousands of them and so forth. You can actually even put a color changer on the front of it, a gel color changer that we sell as well, that you can put on it to change colors. It doesn't have LEDs and so forth. So, but then let's mention the Atomic 3000 LED, which actually is an LED base that replaces the xenon lamp with an LED technology. And it's basically the brightest LED strobe that I know of on the market. It also uses the Aura backlight, and it has basically the same look and feel of our original Atomic 3000 DMX. And here's a couple of pictures of it. I know this doesn't really give it justice here in a picture, but yeah, it gets really bright, obviously, and so forth. But one of the cool things is you also have the Aura backlight that I mentioned before, so to kind of create that two-toned effect that I was mentioning. So we've had a lot of good feedback on this product and so forth, and designers, lighting designers love the fact that you can be able just to kind of ghost the lens on it, because once again, it's great filler when you don't want a very bright, distracting light on a stage or whatever. You just want to put a slight, subtle look on the stage without like ticking out the strobe and so forth. You can just essentially use it for just a backlight per se, like we were talking about earlier. So this is the Atomic LED, so it's a pretty cool product. Now we also have a baby version of the Atomic LED, which is called the Atomic Dot. This is another recent product. We've been very busy at Martin, by the way, if you haven't noticed. So this is a pretty new fixture. It's an LED-based strobe, but it's very compact. It's versatile. It can be mounted in different clusters. It can be mounted on mic stands. It has a single power supply where you can chain a bunch of the fixtures together. Also has the Aura eye candy effect, once again, because we love that, and also can be ran off of our P3, which I promise we're going to talk about here at some point in my little webinar here and so forth. So to see some pictures of it, there's 2 versions of it. There's a warm version, again, if you want that warm look, if you want that cold look, there's 2 different versions of it. We were talking about, yeah, so here's the backlight. There's actually 16 pixels that's used for the Aura backlight, and there's different macros and so forth that you can use to change the colors and make them continuously rotate and do all kinds of wacky eye candy stuff, for lack of better words, and so forth. and again, run off our P3. And then I just wanted to show you some artist renderings that I stole off of the Martin website to show you all the different ways that you can use this. And there's a couple of cool case studies on Martin.com if you want to check out how some of our customers have utilized these and so forth. You should check that out. And so forth. So yeah, you can do all kinds of wacky stuff with them and create some really interesting looking stage, looks and designs and so forth. So we sell these different adapters that allow you to do this. Here's one that's on a mic stand, which is one of my favorite. A bunch clustered together in front of a drum risers and so forth. So that's really cool. So moving on, let's talk about our Rush product line. Now, our Rush product line is considered to be high quality because it is, because we co-develop it and so forth with other manufacturers, and it's very cost effective and so forth. So the idea behind this product line is we wanted to build products that were affordable and basically target institutions like houses of worship, nightclubs, and things, discos and things like that and so forth, that don't necessarily have the budget to get a high profile, fixture and so forth. So we've introduced several different products over the past years, and we're continuing to build more of these in order to basically address the needs of our customers that just don't have big budgets and so forth. So here's some of the different products, and again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them here just because of, I don't want to make this a 5-hour presentation as I mentioned, but here's the MH11 beam. It's a discharge-based lamp, moving head. We have the MH10 beam, which actually is kind of cool. I love this fixture because it has a continuous pan and tilt rotation. So it's perfect for nightclubs, and also the ring that you see around it that's in red there, actually you can control that through macros and have it rotate in a different color that's coming out of compared to the primary source output and so forth. So it's an RGBW fixture, but it also has LEDs around the ring of it to create some really cool effects. We also have a hybrid fixture, which is based on a discharge lamp. It's kind of a mid-sized fixture and so forth. It's both a spot and a wash. We talked about hybrids before. And we have the MH6 watches, which is kind of like a smaller version of the Aura, for lack of better words here, and so forth. Then there's a CT version of that MH6, which again is a warm white, kind of just a no-color type fixture that if you don't need, if you have an auto show and they don't want color on their automobiles, they just want a specific tunable color to make the automobile, and it's the paint, the pigment of the color that's on the automobile itself look great. Then you don't want color, the CT would be perfect for that. We also have a small version called the MH Profile, which is a spot fixture and so forth, again, LED based. The Profile Plus, a very compact unit, which is actually fairly bright. Static UV Parcan. We also have an RGB version of that. Now, the difference between the UV and the RGB here is it's actually a single source LED, so you don't see kind of that. Well, if you look at the Par2 Zoom, they're just underneath it and so forth. It's kind of got that honeycomb look. Well, the RGB, the Par3 RGB is kind of a single source LED and so forth. Look on our website if you want more information on that and so forth. And then to our Par2 RGB Zoom and the Par2 CT Zoom, these have been very popular products. We sell a ton of these to houses of worship specifically, where they have a very low ceiling, like 10 to 15 feet throw, maybe 20 foot at the most and so forth, because it has a variable zoom on it. So, and it's very affordable, by the way, and it's great for that type of application or a small nightclub and so forth. We also make something called a BAT, which is basically an RGB, actually this one is RGB AW, so it has amber and white. So it's red, green, blue, amber, white, and UV, all kind of packed into this thing. So this would be great for uplighting curtains and things like that, set pieces and so forth. So it's a great product for that. We also have something called the Blinder, which is one of my favorite Rush products, because if you're kind of old school and you've ever been to a concert, inevitably at some point during the concert, if you're at the Pink concert, for example, they're going to blind the audience, right? So these blinders used to be called MoFays back in the day when I was touring and so forth, and they were basically there to do one thing, and that was to blind you. So we made a version of that, an LED version of that, that basically is a warm light, so it has that kind of tungsten look to it, but it reminds me so much of the mole phase, and it's very small and lightweight. It doesn't use a lot of energy and so forth because it's not using a dimmer, it's using an LED, and they look great. It's a static unit, and it doesn't put out any color. It's just a warm white, and it's perfect for that. Not only using for concert lighters and so forth, but you could also use this as just stage work lights and so forth, and use them as up lights for, you know, drum sets and things like that. All right, then we have the, I'm skipping around a little bit, the CS series, which is another basically Rush product. It's kind of designed for interior lighting to put around, let's say, the walls of a hotel ballroom and so forth. So it's an uplighting based product and so forth. You could also put it on a truss as well. And then we also make some atmospheric products under the Rush product line for clubs specifically. You can check those out on our website. And we also have a fiber optic product. Now, the deal behind the fiber optic fiber source one is essentially you take fiber optics and you stick in the front of it, and then it will illuminate those fiber optics. So if you have like a fiber optic curtain, or you have some fiber optic treatment in your set pieces, your set design and so forth, this is what this product is for. So you essentially take fiber optic, you stick in the end of it, and then it will change color and so forth. And then finally, another one of my favorite products with the Rush, because when I grew up and started dealing with moving lights, this was kind of a product that was kind of you know, pretty much going on at the same time as the moving lighting technologies kicked in and so forth. This is called the scanner. We used to make one a long time ago when we basically now have an LED version of it. The difference between this fixture is the physical head doesn't move. It's a static fixture, but what we do is essentially we take the LED and we project it into a mirror, and we move the mirror around to basically position the light. And one of the cool things about this particular product is you can whip that beam around very quickly with that mirror and so forth. And you can also mount this product very flush to the ceiling. So if you have a nightclub that has a very low ceiling, like a disco or so forth, and you want to suck this thing right up to the ceiling and so forth, it's great. And you also get that very robotic movement. So if you have something like a dun, 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 that type of thing, the mirror will basically respond to that. It's that quick. So that's one of the advantages of this. One of the disadvantages is you don't get the amount of freedom of pan and tilt with the mirror. It's limited in its movement and so forth, but it's a great product for a nightclub. I could see this being used at resorts all over the world and so forth. Yeah, so just a few examples of some of these different products and so forth. This is a Metallica Tour using the Atomic 3000 and the Axiom Hybrid, which we spoke of earlier, I believe, yeah. And then this next one is, I think, the Scorpions. And this is using our quantum wash, which we spoke of, the Atomic 3000 LED, along with the Viper profile itself. And I'll just page through these fairly quickly so we can move on here. Here's another concert tour using the Air Effects, which I'm very familiar with. We have some of those at our arena here locally in Dallas, Fort Worth. And also the Mac Aura, which we spoke of, a very useful product there for this because they're probably using it on stage and so forth. I don't know exactly where they're positioned in the rig here. Probably on the stage as shin busters and things like that, or maybe on that truss piece that you see there. Here's kind of a Broadway style show here that's using both the performance and some of our creative LED technology called the DC strip, which I'll mention here a little bit later. And here's another one. I think this is Mercedes, I believe, here using both the Wash DX and the Quantum Wash and so forth for this show. Okay, a Broadway show specifically using the Encore Performance, I believe. And then finally, this is, because I'm very familiar with this, this is actually something I do on the side is I do lighting for the Dallas Stars and so forth, and we're using both profiles and the Mac Viper Air Effects here. So essentially you're getting, I can tell you specifically what I'm doing here. The spots are basically the rings that you see there, like the time tunnel effect that you see on the ice there, and the wash is all the green you see there. So, and that's actually at about a 70-foot throw from the truss that's there to the ice and so forth. And actually the Viper Air Effects are in the corners, and that's about 120-foot throw if I remember correctly. So again, the Viper range and so forth is kind of designed for this type of application. And again, with a big piece of ice there, it's just perfect. It's like canvas. It's the perfect type of lighting surface. If you want to light something light ice, it looks killer. So anyway, moving on. Architectural lighting. We're also into the architectural lighting. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly here. Architectural lighting essentially, first and foremost, is designed for extreme environments. It's designed for outdoor environments, rain, sleet, cold, so forth. That's what this product line is designed for. And we have several variants of that. We have the exterior.HP, which I'm actually working on a project in San Antonio right now that's using the exterior.HP to put all around the hotel itself. I can't tell you which hotel it is, but it's supposed to look really cool once it's finished and so forth. But there's several hundred of these around the hotel and so forth. And they're outdoor rated, and they're in San Antonio, Texas, and 110-degree heat. They're going to get baked to death. So that's what they're designed for. We also make in-ground products, which I'm sure you've seen around. What in-ground is basically just for walkways and things like that. We make all these different cove products. We have the linear quad cove. We have the linear quad grays. We also have an RGB version. Now, the difference between the quads versus the RGB version, again, is going back to what I was talking about in the earlier slide, where you have a 4-in-1 LED versus having kind of the Skittles thing. Well, we have both. So if you don't really need precise lighting and you don't necessarily care about the streaking of lighting that you may get from the Skittles kind of output and so forth, then probably the RGBW version of it would work for you. But if you're real picky about your lighting and you don't want any streaking, you want exact color rendering on a surface and so forth, then you probably want to go with a quad LED and so forth. We also make a CT version of both of these, which again is just kind of a warm white, cool white type of version and so forth. And these fixtures are all also customizable. You can special order specific lengths and things like that. Here's a variation of it, the Pixel line. Again, I'm doing a project for a stadium, football stadium that's undisclosed location, basically for their player tunnel where they walk out. And what they want is these Pixel lines to actually have video mapped to them. So it kind of creates that time tunnel type of effect and so forth. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. It uses our P3 system. We'll talk about that more later. But it's a very specific project because they want when their players actually come out of the tunnel and get onto the football field, they want to have all kinds of eye candy going on in the background and so forth. And so this is going to be a very cool project when it's finished and so forth. Exterior wash fixtures. So if you're thinking of lighting things like statues, or that type of thing, or outside of museums and so forth, then we have some variations of exterior washes here, once again, fully IP rated or fully outdoor rated and so forth. Again, bigger versions of that. The more we go, the brighter they get, essentially here. So if you've got more of like a bridge installation and so forth, where you're lighting a bridge, like pillars on a bridge and so forth, then this may be a solution for you there. We also make projection units here, which essentially are pretty much like kind of spot fixtures, for lack of better words here, but you can actually add gobos in it. So if you were trying to project a logo onto a surface of a building, like a museum and so forth, or put a corporate logo or something on the front of a facade of a building, then you would, we have two different versions of that product, the 500 being not as bright as the 1000 and so forth. Again, all this information is on Martin.com. So here's a few examples of some architectural projects. Obviously, this is a mosque here that we're lighting, and these are some of the products that we're using there to create this look. I think it looks gorgeous, honestly, there with the blue on it and so forth. This is the Superdome here, utilizing both our projection system and our Wash 210. Another example here using our exterior linear product, okay, RGBW fixture here, so that's pretty cool. Here's, I believe this is a hotel using a 310, and once again, just beautiful. It really makes a difference when you light a structure up like that. Here's another one that's using a projection 500 and so forth. Again, projecting that image that you see on the facade of the building there. Okay, so moving on here, let's get into creative video. So we make a bunch of different LED-based products, which we call creative video, because these are products that are basically designed for installation or concert touring, for example, to be customized and so forth. Depending on the product that you're using, of course. But it's It's designed to be basically, especially the VDO family that we're going to talk about here, is designed to be rental optimized. So it's designed to go into touring, on touring applications and so forth, and it's fully outdoor rated, actually, our VDO products and so forth. We also have some exterior family products here for creative video and so forth. Our VC family it's like Legos. You can essentially assemble different size LEDs, these LED VC grids and VC strips and so forth, to create custom, designs and so forth for a set piece and so forth. And all of this stuff that you see here is powered off our P3 processor. Okay, and we're going to get to, I promise you. This is the VDO Fatron, which is like an LED on steroids. There's a couple of different, it's a wide version of our Skeptron and so forth. It's controlled by DMX, or you can run video through it through our P3 system. You have interchangeable lenses. The Dotron is kind of like the HP Dot that we saw earlier, which also has different lenses that you can put on it. Now, I've been promising you I was going to talk a little bit about this whole P3 business. So what the P3 is, if you look at this diagram here, you've got a media server, which would be something like a video jukebox in layman's terms and so forth, that's outputting video to our P3 system. Well, what the P3 system does is it converts that video into ones and zeros with our own proprietary protocol. It then goes through a switch, a network switch and so forth, and then is passed out to our various creative video products, okay? So as you can see, and typically you would use, we have some proprietary cables specifically to combine power and data to actually run out to the various fixtures. That's what the power port is for, actually. It takes the data and then also combines power with it, merges power with it from the power port to then distribute that data and power out to the individual fixtures. And you can see in the lower right-hand corner, you see the VDO Dotrons, the VC strips, the VC grid, and so forth. And also our MAC allures and our atomic dots can also utilize the P3 system as well. So the P3 system is basically a big video processor. Now, if you look at this diagram here, if you look at the top, we have 4 different variants of the P3 itself. We have one that's just laptop-based and so forth, so you can literally run the P3 software, which is free, by the way, as of recently. And essentially, you can just run that on your laptop and then capture, using a special window that you have in the P3 software, you can capture the video playing back on your laptop or on a secondary monitor that you have on your desktop computer and so forth, and then send that data out via an Ethernet cable to the power port, and then basically provide video for all of these products. Then we have some rack mount versions. There's the P350, the P3150, and the P3300. And basically, depending on the product, with the 4 products, the P3 PC does up to 20,000 pixels or over 20,000 pixels. The P350 does 100,000 pixels. Now, pixel is RGB. It's not just red and then a separate pixel's green, a separate one's blue and so forth. It's RGB or RGBW. So that's what a pixel is, essentially, like you'd have on your LED television and so forth. So the P3150 is up to 520,000 pixels, and then you get a whopping over 2 million pixels with this. But all this is a processor. Now, one of the advantages of using the P3 system over using like DMX to do like pixel mapping, if you've ever heard of that term before, is that our proprietary system gives us full 60 frames a second of output. So you don't get latency when you're trying to do a bunch of quick flash and trash kind of things on our video products and so forth. You can run these products off of DMX, but they're really designed to work off of our P3 system. And one of the advantages of that is you get very little latency, no latency at all, as a matter of fact, when you're playing back video, as opposed to trying to do this with traditional DMX protocol and so forth. Okay. So some few examples here, and I'll just go through these fairly quickly. Here's a P3, again, a concert tour that's utilizing a P3300 with a video Dotron and a Skeptron, excuse me, here. Here's another example using a P350 control system, the video Skeptron concert tour. This is a nightclub that I believe is in Vegas that's utilizing our P3 system, the VC .9s and the VC Strip 25. Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the, I'm going to skip over this, but this is the College Football Hall of Fame, essentially. And what that does, basically, what that system is comprised of is the VC.9s and so forth, and they essentially have the whole facade of the building essentially covered with these VC.9s, and they can project video through it. And it's right in the middle of downtown Atlanta, right next to, I think, Grant Park and so forth. And it just looks fascinating when you walk by it and so forth. So here's another example of P350 with their exterior PIX line 20s. Ferris wheels, we do Ferris wheels too, interesting enough. So this is a P3 system, and the .4, which the .4s and the .9s are very cool because they're bendable and flexible. You can shape them to structures like you see here. Here's a auto show, with a P350 and the VC strips. Those VC strips can be basically customized to lengths. You can cut them to lengths for whatever your design is and so forth. A television type show and so forth, utilizing our VC grid system and a P350. And then just another example here. Now, skipping on here to our atmospheric effects, we have, yes, we make smoke machines and things like that. We have a company called Jim. It's over in the UK that manufactures different foggers. We have both foggers, haze machines. We make a fan. We have something called the glaciator, which is for that low-lying fog type of effect, if you're interested in that. And we also, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Rush products as well. We have some smoke machines and hazers and so forth for the Rush product line. Okay. So that's basically our entire product line. I want to move on and just quickly for the next 10 minutes or so talk about Lighting 101. So you know now what products that we have in our catalog and so forth, but I want to talk about, for those of you that are not familiar with controlling lighting systems, basically, if you have no knowledge of that or very little, that's what I want to cover right now. I'm going to try to do this in 10 minutes. So anyway, so this is a good opportunity for those of you that are just unfamiliar with this and how all this stuff hooks up and so forth. I'm going to try to give you a little crash course on it here in the next 5 minutes or so, 5 or 10 minutes, sorry. So just bear with me here. So, so when you're operating a lighting system, let's say you're going out, I'm going to use a concert tour as an example because that's something I'm very familiar with and number one and so forth. But this applies to many other applications besides concert touring. This could be on a house of worship show. This could be a festival. This could be whatever, corporate show and so forth. So the key things, there's 5 key things to this. Is number one, you need to set up the console and the fixtures. You need to patch the lighting fixtures. We'll talk about patch in a second into your lighting console. You have to set the address of the fixture itself because all these fixtures that we've talked about, both in our product line and even in our competitors and so forth, they utilize DMX. We're going to talk about that in depth here in a moment and so forth. So, but you need to set the DMX address of the fixture. You also need to program your show, the event show, usually during rehearsals and so forth. Sometimes you can do that offline, and then you play back the show. That's the key steps in order to basically create an event or show, whether it's a one-off festival or you're doing a big KISS concert or something like that. That's basically the 5 steps. Now, let's talk briefly about DMX 512 because all these fixtures that we've talked about here, all of them in our product line and so forth support DMX 512. Now, what the heck is DMX 512? It's an industry standard protocol that's used essentially to communicate from a lighting console to a lighting fixture, whatever that fixture may be, an LED light, a moving light, so forth. It's an industry standard that's been around since the Stone Age. It's, well, many years, let's just say. It's 512 individual channels. They're 8 bits, so there's only 256 steps in that protocol. So, and it's basically a serial data link. So a DMX universe is 512 channels itself on a single DMX 512 cable. So you get 512 channels out of that and so forth. So the thing about DMX and so forth, if you have a moving light, it takes a certain amount of channels to control that moving light fixture. For example, going back to the early on the Mac Viper and so forth, there's probably, I think there's 29 to 30 channels that are utilized on that particular fixture and so forth. So it's not like each fixture is an individual DMX channel. Some of those fixtures have a footprint of 30 channels. We even have one product now that takes up a whole universe, which is 512 channels and so forth. Also, DMX is a balanced data signal. So you basically have a hot and a cold, essentially, and through the magic of basically technology, it figures out if the signal is valid or not at the other end. And whatever it doesn't like, it rejects. Whatever it likes, it will allow pass through to the fixture itself. And depending on the address of the fixture, it will either respond or just ignore it and so forth. Kind of like your mailman delivering mail to a specific mailbox. That's kind of the way DMX works. It's a one-directional protocol, by the way. Okay, and DMX fixtures can be daisy chained together. So here you see an example of the controller and the slave devices and so forth. So you can daisy chain it in and out up until, based on the DMX standard, if you follow it, which you should, is 32 channels. And then after that, you're supposed to put a terminator on the last fixture, on the output of the last fixture to create, prevent problems from occurring and so forth. So every, again, going through this fairly quickly, every DMX-compatible lighting fixture must have a unique address, as I mentioned before. So if you have one fixture that's on 1 and it takes up 19 channels, the next one needs to be set on 20. If you overlap the channels, you're going to have issues. You're going to have control issues. Both lights are going to do some wacky doodle stuff. So you want to make sure that every light is on a unique address, and that's usually sorted out at the beginning when you start your programming. Fixtures have different DMX modes that must also be set. So in lighting fixtures like you saw, the Vipers and the Encores and so forth, you can actually change the mode of them. And I would basically, an analogy of that is like buying accessories for your car. So you can basically buy the basic version car that maybe doesn't have roll-up windows or air conditioning, or you can basically purchase one that has everything in it and so forth. Well, in the case of moving light fixtures and lighting fixtures and LED fixtures and so forth, these modes you can set on the fly. So if you have an issue where you only have a lighting console that only has 2 universes of output, then you may want to put the fixture in a more dumbed down mode so you get less features, but you can fit more into that DMX system that you have there and so forth. So all of these fixtures essentially have profiles that they depend on. The profiles themselves are actually created by the manufacturers of the lighting console, but the actual blueprint for what parameter, what DMX channel controls which function within that fixture is actually provided by us, the manufacturer. So when we release the Encores and the Auras and all that stuff and so forth, we had to provide that blueprint, which is on our martin.com website, so that the manufacturer's lighting consoles could create fixture profiles so they'll know where to map all those different functions, like pan and tilt needs to go on these and color is here and so forth. So that's a fixture profile, and those are updated regularly by console manufacturers and so forth. And they're sometimes called DMX traits, you know, either profiles or traits, but those traits are basically published periodically by manufacturers when they release a product and so forth. And then basically, as I mentioned, the fixture profile tells the console where are the knobs and where to map stuff and all of that business. So as I mentioned, DMX 512 is a one-directional protocol. The controller on the other end, the controller itself doesn't know if the fixture's actually plugged in or not. It's just sending the message out based on how you patch the fixture. So if the fixture's unplugged, the console has no idea. Now there's an exception to that, and that's RDM, which is remote data management, where you can basically, if the fixture itself supports RDM, then you can basically put the console into RDM mode where it'll go out and ping the fixtures to actually see if they're out there. And you can get some limited information from using RDM. And you also can use RDM to change the mode on the fixture if it supports it, again, if the fixture supports it. And you can also change its DMX address remotely. So there's some advantages of RDM, but what you're basically doing when you're using RDM, remote data management, is you're stopping the console from outputting per se, and you're now listening to the fixtures and so forth. So you're kind of changing directions, like a police officer changing directions on the street and so forth. So it's kind of the same type of thing. But RDM is actually pretty critical because we have some fixtures that are so small, there's no way to put a physical DMX address on the fixture itself. So we have to use RDM in order to remotely address the fixture. So you need to make sure you have a console that's RDM compatible in order to address the fixture itself. Okay. So as I mentioned, DMX is an addressable protocol. Each device must have its own unique DMX address and so forth within that 512 range. All right. DMX is distributed either by 3 or 5 pin. I'd prefer you use 5 pin, please. Maximum of 1,300 feet approximately, and no more than 32 fixtures on a chain. Some manufacturers actually, for like some of the cheaper stuff that you may get from China or overseas and so forth, only uses 3 pins because it's cheaper to do that than using because microphone cables use 3-pin XLRs, and so it's cheaper for them to do that because pins 4 and 5 on the DMX and the DMX protocol aren't utilized. So anyway, so you'll see a lot of 3-pinning, a lot of 5-pin. All of our fixtures pretty much have 5-pin by default. We try to stay away from 3-pin, but some of them have both 3 and 5-pin. Some of our fixtures have both 3 and 5-pin options and so forth. But 5-pin is the industry standard. It also helps you not get it mixed up with audio cable. And this is kind of what it looks like as far as the 10 out and so forth. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but you can look that up online. You also have adapters that can go from 5 to 3-pin. If you have a fixture that is strictly 3-pin, you can use adapter because, once again, you're not using pins 4 and 5 on the DMX protocol. And the DMX standard says that you must use a terminator at the last fixture so that it doesn't create like an antenna, per se, on the line. So if you have a long string of DMX cable to a fixture, I've even had this problem at the arena here in Dallas and so forth, and you don't terminate it, you can have some crazy things going on in your lighting system, some weird behavior because it's acting like an antenna unless you plug it up with a terminator, all right? Now, you can also distribute DMX through Ethernet as well. There's a lot of installations in buildings and so forth that simply use Cat5 as opposed to kind of the microphone style cable you would see used on concerts that runs through essentially buildings and so forth through conduit because it's cheaper to do and so forth, and it's much easier for them to fit it through conduit. And then you can have these Ethernet to 5-pin adapters, which you see in this picture here, to allow you to convert it from an Ethernet cable, a Cat5 cable, or a Cat6 cable into an XLR that would then plug into your console and so forth so that you can mate them up properly. There's also these things called optosplitters. So if you're running a lot of DMX cable for a long distance and so forth, you can use this optosplitter to basically plug in the input and then get 8 outputs and so forth. And one of the advantages of using an optosplitter is it allows you to basically extend the length of the cable, and it also refreshes the data. So if you've had any transmission errors or so forth from the console down the DMX line that may be running next to some high power, high voltage lines and so forth, it'll see that and basically refresh it so it can extend basically the length of your DMX. And so there's various optosplitters by various manufacturers. There's also DMX wireless, which can be a little hit or miss depending on the manufacturer and depending on the situation you're in. Trust me, I've used several different. We don't manufacture any wireless DMX stuff, so I'm showing you an example of one here from Elation. And this is actually, I've used this unit, and it actually works fairly well as long as it's line of sight and so forth. But that's a way of basically distributing, having a transmitter that plugs into your console, and then the receiver plugs into your first lighting fixture, and then you can daisy chain from that lighting fixture to the rest of your system and so forth. And but it does have its limitations. You really need line of sight, and you needs to be on a specific RF frequency. You need to have one that's a good unit that will change frequencies in case it overlaps with something like a production. Maybe they have their own Wi-Fi and so forth. And I mentioned, you remember the Spinal Tap movie? Maybe you guys don't, but there's an example where the guitar player's playing and they're at an Air Force base and they're playing a concert and so forth, and they start hooking up the air traffic control. And I, for some reason, put that in there. I thought it was funny. Sorry. All right. So again, with DMX 512, and I'll get past DMX 512 in just a second, I promise you guys, don't use 3-pin audio cable because it's different. It's not the same as DMX cable. Make sure that you can use audio cable in the pinch, but don't use it. It has different capacitance. There's some other different electrical properties where you shouldn't use it, because it's very tempting if you have a 3-pin fixture to take an XLR. We'll buy one at Guitar Center and use an XLR, which you can buy for $5 there, you know, in quantity and so forth, as opposed to using a proper 5-pin DMX cable. So, or even if it's 3-pin, make sure it's a DMX cable and not an audio cable and so forth. It's hard to tell the difference. That's another reason to use 5-pin cable, because your audio guy won't get it mixed up with your with the lighting guy and so forth. Because if it's 5-pin, you know it's DMX. If it's a 3-pin, you know it's an audio guy and so forth. But the impedance is different and so forth. And cheap mic cables sometimes have poor shielding, so you're going to have all kinds of wacky stuff happen, or potentially if you use audio cable. It's happened to me. Trust me, it has happened to me on some smaller gigs and so forth. So don't use audio cable, period, and so forth. Now, there's variations of the the DMX protocol. One is called ArtNet, and ArtNet is actually kind of cool because it allows you to distribute multiple DMX universes over a single Cat5 cable. Okay, is specifically over 32,000 universes can be distributed through a single Cat5 cable. So if your console is able to basically output ArtNet, which is an open source protocol, then you can basically use a single Cat5 cable to distribute tons of DMX universes, as opposed to having a bunch of multiple 5-pin outputs at the back of your console. What if you needed 40 universes of DMX to run your system? You're going to have 40 DMX cables coming out of the back of your desk? No. So what most manufacturers do, if not all now, major console lighting manufacturers, is they support ArtNet and so forth. And so we have these, and it's also based on an IP protocol. I won't get into that and so forth. But you have these ArtNet nodes, and again, this is an Elation one that I've also used, that essentially take that ArtNet and they convert it into the 5-pin, and then on the unit itself or at the console, you can set which port is putting out which DMX universe and so forth. Now, a variation of that is something that's more recent. It's called streaming ACN, which is a little better protocol to a certain extent because it actually supports much more universes. I mean, 63,000 universes. You guys, please call me if you have any show that's using 63,000 universes of DMX. It's not locked to a specific IP range. Again, I won't get into that techno mumbo jumbo here. It uses standard Ethernet switches to distribute data like ArtNet. And since it's a newer protocol, one of the downsides is it's not really supported by every manufacturer yet, but that's coming. Streaming ACN has become more popular and so forth. Now, you can also use basically a device that basically converts ArtNet's streaming ACN to fiber. So if you have a stadium show, which I know of a lot of shows that are out there, like let's say the Super Bowl and so forth, where you've got to run data for long distances and so forth, you're limited on 1,500 feet for a DMX cable and so forth, or 300 feet if you're using ArtNet, if you're using Cat5. And so what a lot of times they do is they convert the ArtNet or streaming ACN into fiber, which fiber you can run for miles. And then they convert it back to Cat5, and then they, from there, break it into 5-pin DMX to plug into the fixtures itself. All right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's DMX traits, and basically that are distributed by manufacturers that tell you which channel does what on the fixture itself, and then console manufacturers take this information and they create fixture profiles, if I can talk correctly here, fixture profiles, and publish those, or sorry, put those into the desk, and then they periodically will release updates and so forth so you can get those. Sometimes the profiles are available online and so forth. This is what a profile looks like for the Allure patched into Elation's Onyx software, their Obsidian software and so forth. So this is what it looks like as it's patched. You notice the Allure is basically, if you can see this, they're basically 32 channels each. So you can see the addressing is 1 and then 33 and 65. So each one of the fixtures uses 32 channels. So you have to make sure that you follow that so that you don't overlap the channels and so forth. So the consoles, most of the consoles are smart and will auto patch for you and not allow the fixtures to overlap and so forth. Okay, and I mentioned RDM, remote data management, which allows you to poll connected lighting fixtures to obtain basic information, including lamp hours, temperatures. Most of our products, not the Rush line, but most of our Pro products and Aero products and so forth, and our Creative Video products support RDM, by the way, so you can remotely address them and check various things and so forth on them. But I've used RDM to remotely address fixtures because sometimes you'll hang the fixture up there, it goes up 30 feet in the air on a truss, and you go, oh no, it's on the wrong address. What do I do? Well, you can RDM into it, change the address of it and so forth, and you don't have to send somebody up 30 feet on a ladder and so forth to change it manually. So it's really handy and so forth, but it's got its limitations, and not everybody's supporting it right now. So you have to check with the manufacturer if they actually support RDM, and it may not be something that you even need and so forth. And it also ties up the console output. So if you're running RDM and you're doing an RDM scan to figure out what fixtures are on in your lighting system, you need to make sure you turn it off. Trust me, I've learned that the hard way. So, okay, and this is what a typical lighting system looks like. We're just taking a standard DMX 5-pin cable here and connecting it to the fixtures and then making sure they're addressed independently of each other, 1, 32, 65, 97. This is a Grand MA console made by MA Lighting, by the way. And that's just a single Cat5, not Cat5, excuse me, a DMX 512 cable, daisy chain to each one of those fixtures and so forth. Now, here's basically using ArtNet. So you basically have your Grand MA console with ArtNet coming out of it, which again is up to 32,000 universes of DMX. that goes through an ArtNet node, and then the ArtNet node basically is, depending on the port, it's assigned to universe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, or whatever, up to eight universes on this particular elation node and so forth. So you specify either the console or on the ArtNet node itself what port, what 5-pin port you want to output which universe and so forth. So if these were all on universe 1, then I could go to the console or on the node itself and just basically say make port 1 universe 1, make port 2 universe 2, or port or universe 15, or you can make both of them or all 8 of them be universe 1 if you wanted to. So anyway, that's how that works. And then just as far as controllers are concerned, there's software-based controllers that many companies have. Camsys makes it, also Elation with their Obsidian Onyx software. There's all kinds of different software controllers, and usually those software controllers use an interface that lets you convert like USB into DMX and so forth, and here's some examples of those and so forth. You have some that actually will also do ArtNet as well. Okay, hardware-based controllers are basically, the advantages of those is they're kind of laid out like the cockpit of an airplane, so you get access to all the features of the fixtures and so forth. There's built-in touchscreens. Typically, they have more DMX universe capacity than other software-based controllers. They're designed to be roadworthy and have dedicated internal operating systems which are streamlined for programming. I don't want to go into a menu and then to a sub-menu and a sub-menu if I've got an LD behind me yelling at me because I need to get this thing programmed while the performers, the artists, are on stage. I can't be doing that. I need the interface in front of me, just like the cockpit of an airplane. I need that kind of control system, especially in this kind of situation that we have as of late, where, time is money and budgets are getting reduced and so forth on touring shows. So they really want everything programmed, if not pre-programmed, before you show up on site. And you don't want to be trying to do that with a software-based controller. Again, trust me, I know from experience. Now, there are some basically standalone controllers where you basically set it and forget it. You program them using a lighting console, for example, and then you just send that data into them, and that basically scores it. And then essentially you can set it up so that it changes colors. Let's say you're doing a facade of a building or so forth, and you want it to change colors. From at 6 p.m. you want to go to more of a dinner-like mood or something. At 3 a.m. and so forth, you want it to turn off and so forth. That's what standalone controllers are used for, so you don't have to have the physical console sitting there and so forth. There's some low-end consoles out there where usually are either 1 universe DMX or less that just have a bunch of faders on them. They're not very conducive to running automated lighting, but they may be perfect for small systems, DJs and so forth, where they just want to bring up different looks with faders and so forth, where you don't have fixtures that aren't very sophisticated and so forth. They'd be perfect for that, but they usually have limited DMX capability. Where some of the mainstream consoles like the Grand MA made by MA Lighting over in Europe and Elation's Obsidian product line, this is their one of their NX consoles and so forth, which has multiple universes. I think the NX has up to 128 universes, if I remember correctly. The Grand MA is similar and so forth. So these are more hardware-based controllers, and you can see both of them are laid out in such a way that you can access their parameters fairly quickly and so forth. So anyway, that's a basic look at the control system. So if you didn't know anything about controlling lighting and so forth, using DMX or ArtNet and so forth, and how all that stuff hooks up, that was my intention here and so forth. So just finally, before I talk about the future and so forth, and then hand this back over, this is a picture I did. This is talking about pre-visualization. I mentioned it just earlier. Essentially, what you're seeing more and more of happening is a lot of the pre-programming done offline, and especially these days, where essentially you want to do a lot of your programming at home or sitting down with a designer and so forth before you show up on site. And so this is a visualization program that's made by a company called Capture and so forth. And what this is a house of worship facility here in Dallas, Fort Worth and so forth, where I did some pre-programming for them and so forth. Completely offline, and then when I showed up there, I just loaded the show file into the lighting console and updated some of the presets and so forth, and off you go. And the cool thing about these 3D visualizers is you literally can control them, the position of the camera and so forth, so you can look at the image here in different ways and rotate around the stage and look at it from the audience perspective or from the stage perspective looking out in the audience. So you've got all these different camera positions and so forth. So anyway, that's something that you're seeing more and more being utilized as the technology gets better, computers get faster and so forth. So this visualization system is pretty cool. And then finally, the future. What direction are we going as far as the future and so forth with Martin and maybe just the lighting industry as a whole? First and foremost, the LED development is going to continue. LEDs keep getting brighter, 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 and brighter and so forth, and they have to be, and I'll tell you why. A lot of shows, both television shows, concert touring, and so forth, are basically saturating their stages because the designer's wishes and the performer's wishes and so forth, with a lot of LED, both of IMAX screens, a lot of creative LED stuff, which we actually manufacture and so forth. And what's happening as far as just the old school traditional lighting looks where you have these stabs of light and so forth, they're getting completely washed out by the LED because, for the benefit of the performer or the designer and so forth, production designer, the lighting designer and so forth, the artist wants to see more video. They want all that movement. I can almost feel sometimes like I'm driving to a drive-in theater, watching a movie at a drive-in theater sometimes at some concerts because it's so much video and you kind of lose the whole lighting feel, the kind of the intimacy of the lighting looks and so forth, unless Broadway's an exception there. But so we need brighter fixtures and so forth to basically counter all the brightness that you're getting out of the LED, the creative LED utilization now that you see on many shows and so forth, including corporate events and so forth. I think that's one thing. So you'll probably see a move more towards LED technology, brighter is better, and so forth. And then number two, I think you'll start seeing a little bit more of VR technology, virtual reality, because I have a flight simulator right now where I have some goggles I can put on, and I know you can do this with drones too. I can fly completely VR, and I can see VR being utilized within the lighting industry, especially for programming and just pre-visualization of scenic pieces and stages and so forth, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of the direction we're going. So obviously the LED technology and more VR, more pre-production to save on cost of being on site and so forth. And I know just in closing here that our Martin engineers that are over in Europe and so forth are moving forward. We have some more exciting products that'll are a little delayed because of the current crisis that's going on around the world, but we have some exciting products on the horizon, and we've been working. We've actually released a couple of products during our crisis that we have right now that's going on and so forth. So we're continuing to develop and move our technologies forward to meet the customer's demands and so forth. So anyway, that's about it. I want to thank you for attending my webinar, and it was a little bit long and so forth, but I hope you got some information out of that. If you have any questions, you can basically email me at marion.hall@harman.com. You can also go onto our website. There's a lot of different resources on our website for information on all these different products and so forth that we talked about, some of them briefly and so forth. So if there's any questions that you have and so forth, feel free to reach out to me personally, email me and so forth. Look on the website, and I hope to see you guys in the future. And by the way, we have a bunch of other webinars and so forth that we've recorded that if you go to martin.com, you can find those and so forth. There's one specifically I think would be interesting for you to watch if you're interested in the P3 system, or there's some lighting design stuff. But I know a couple of my comrades that are on the West and East Coast put together a P3 how-to thing, and I know I talked about P3 briefly, excuse me here. But there's also another one on architectural products, so there's some overlap here. So I would encourage you to go and check that out. And hopefully we'll see you guys soon in person at some point at a trade show in the future like LDI and so forth. So hopefully we'll get through the issues that we're having right now. Thank you very much for listening to me here, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar and got some information out of it. Goodbye.